Hey, so I wanted to bring up a concept, an idea that you may already be familiar with, but maybe you're not familiar with it at all. And I think the knee-jerk reaction to this is that's not true, or no, I'm not, or you can be so deep inside this illusion, and most people are, that you couldn't possibly fathom that it's not real. I'm going to talk about this, and I want to give a caveat, a big one, immediately, as soon as possible. But when you are thinking about other people, when you're making judgments on other people, or especially when you're fixated on someone else, and you're running through all kinds of ideas and judgments about them, analysis and conclusions, all that stuff, you are projecting. It is you that you're talking about in some form or another. This is why the world is your reflection, and this is why there is nothing and no one to change but self. And before I even continue at all, I want to put a huge caveat on that, because these are just very simple words coming out of my mouth that could easily be misconstrued. It does not mean that if you're in a relationship with somebody who is abusive, that they are abusing you because that is what you're creating, like intentionally in a mundane way, that you can then fix intentionally in a mundane way. You know, when you manifest something in your life like that, it is true that there is nothing and no one to change but self. It is true that you do not need to change the person who is displaying the abusive behavior. But you also quickly move out of that circumstance when you change, like, at all. If you're in a situation where you're with someone like that, or you're in a close relationship of any kind with someone like that, pretty much immediately, as you begin to examine your self-concept, which hopefully for most people will produce some sort of leap almost immediately, sort of like the beginner's gain, almost immediately, the first thing that falls into place is a level of respect for yourself that simply isn't tolerant of that happening anymore. And sometimes that results in the other person's behavior changing and the abuse stopping. But that doesn't mean that you created it. That doesn't mean that anybody who would have been in that situation with you would have displayed that behavior. So it's not what any of that means. And most people don't choose to continue a relationship with somebody who is operating at that level. It's just that simple. But I don't ever want anything I say to be misconstrued, because these concepts never mean that. They never mean subject yourself to abuse. They never mean stay in a relationship that is toxic, regardless of what role you played in it. You know, it's always a two-way street. There's always two people playing a role in every interaction. And it's easy, very easy. And sadly, even for some people who are like teachers of this, it's very easy to construe that as I stay in this situation and continue to subject myself to abuse. Unfortunately, if you're at such a point that you would be in that relationship to begin with, it pretty much goes hand in hand with that you are not at a place where you could then turn that whole thing around. It's like it's mutually exclusive. It just, in reality, it generally plays out that you leave that behind and create something else. Anyway, but I wanted to say that very clearly before I go on. And I'm immediately going to demonstrate this with a personal example that you could actually go back and see if you wanted on this channel. When I was first making videos here, I had a friendship with somebody that was literally just a friendship. It never went much beyond that. But there was like a relationship situation going on. And my perception of this person as a sane individual, I mean, you can watch my channel and decide what you think about my mental stability. Most people that I know would consider me to be pretty stable, pretty sane, pretty rational, and fairly insightful, definitely self-aware. So even 5 years ago, or I was in that state. That's who I was, and my perception of this person was that they were unavailable. They were withholding. They were a commitment phobe. That was my interpretation of that person. And I made a video on here eventually when I started to become aware of this thing, this concept I'm talking about, that basically, we know that the world is your projection. We know that there's nothing and no one to change but self. And if you really believe those things, you don't have to do much else, because they'll start to reveal themselves. You'll start to interpret all of your, every moment of everyday interactions with those things as truths. It takes a little while for that stuff to take root and start to become natural. But if you really believe that, that will happen. And so eventually, I had the necessary insight and realization to understand that those thoughts that I was having about him, he was my projection. Those were things that were true of me. And like everything else, it's not always a direct parallel like that. Sometimes you're viewing somebody as withholding, and there's something else about you that is creating that projection or interpreting behavior that way. There's a lot of interpretations for any objective, if there's such a thing, situation in the 3D world. There's a million different interpretations for it, and how you interpret it has everything to do with you. And a lot of the time, 80% of what you're seeing isn't real, if not more. So I was viewing this person as a commitment phobe, not available, not all in, unwilling to go all in. And I realized, made videos about it at the time, that whether or not it was true, those things were true about him, those conclusions were actually true about me. I was not at a place where I was ready to go all in. I was not fully available. This was because at the time, my ex, who I've mentioned on this channel, who I run a business with, we were still a lot more, we were too emotionally involved to be fully available for somebody else, which once I had that realization, I bit the bullet and we addressed that. But so it's, it's amazing how you'll create these relationships with people, and, maybe you can't even fully understand, how did I get into this situation, which now perfectly reflects me, where there's a situation in front of me that perfectly reflects all of my projections. It's, I think the magic is in our inability to process that. It's like this human sort of failing or inability to be aware of the, magnificent microprocessor that we have going on all the time, creating all these things automatically on autopilot. That's kind of where the magic, it's like the experience has a magical element to it because of that. But this stuff it's clearly being created by each individual, and it goes both directions for anybody involved in a relationship. It's just perfection. You are to them what they need you to be. They are to you what you need them to be. And your projections, their projections, it all just works beautifully. But so anytime you're fixated on somebody else's behavior, or anytime there is a lack, you're perceiving a lack, something wrong with the relationship, something missing, something has changed, something has never been right, or whatever. Anytime you are fixated on something like that, you're in an illusion. You're in a projection, and it's a skill that I don't know that anybody can ever really master this. It's sort of mastery of this, I think, kind of really changes the game in a way that I'm not sure too many people really want the game to be changed. People like the game, dude. Like, just admit that you like the game. Admit that you like this. Do you really want it to be over? Because you can walk away from this anytime you want by just completely changing your mind by just completely letting go of the game. You don't want to do that. It's too interesting and fun. So even if your version of interesting and fun is, I hate this and I'm miserable. Anytime you're making judgments or drawing conclusions about something, and this probably extends far beyond people. This is probably just a universal truth about anything you're fixated on or making judgments about. But for me, I've noticed this is especially true. Like the example I just gave with my friend Steve from the beginning of this channel. I see it with my ex and Matt all the time too. You know, if there's like an issue going on in a relationship with me and somebody else, it can feel so solid and real, your judgments on this situation. And it turns out it's just you trying to work through something with yourself. There is nothing and no one to change but self. And honestly, it can be really scary to commit to this idea, and it can be really easy to make bad mistakes if you do commit to this idea without having a lot of boundaries in place to keep you safe while you're exploring it. But I think it's a step that anybody probably who's watching this channel is somewhere in there is intending to make. Did any of this make any sense? There is nothing and no one to change but self. Anybody who's in your life and there is a behavioral issue, there's discord, something like that, that is only there to help you work through something with yourself. Without any blame or judgment on yourself whatsoever, understand that you are facilitating this experience, like in your human form, from your human form. In some way or another, you are facilitating this experience for yourself. And if you're willing to look at everything that way, everything is a gift. Everything is a huge upgrade. Sometimes things take a while to work out, but I mean, you know, if at the end of this experience, you have accomplished everything you, the higher you, intended to accomplish, you know, what more do you want? I think I'm just going to stop there. I think that's enough to think about. And again, I just want to say, you know, if you find yourself in a situation that you are very miserable in, that has, you know, objective, like psychological or physical abuse or something like that happening, you know, something that a psychiatrist could diagnose or something like that, to that level, you personally did not create that. If you have any physical ability whatsoever to be out of it, you are facilitating it continuing. And that doesn't give a pass to anybody who is, you know, an abuser whatsoever. And I think it's really, really important to make this clear. Abuse of any kind is never something that you should stay around and endure. It just isn't. It doesn't benefit you, and it doesn't benefit the abuser. So, I don't know. Try not to take these concepts and then run away with them and put yourself in situations that are bad. You know, I think you need to be careful. You need to be careful with these ideas and default back to, you know, when in doubt, default back to the traditional world thinking, because, you know, traditional world thinking is there for a reason, and it's caused man to evolve to the point man is at now, right? It's there for a reason. If you're creating the abuser, then you created all this other stuff to fall back onto, right? You created it all. So you have no obligation whatsoever to stay in a situation that is bad or unsafe. And these are concepts you can explore in your mind and slowly and carefully. It's nothing that you need to make some huge leap into. Anyway, I hope that any of that made any sense or provided any value in any way. And I hope you have a great day.